DZRJ 810 AM and RJFM 100.3. There's no excuse not to listen anywhere and wherever you want. Listen on your phone or computer anytime, anywhere in the world. Just download the app for free. How do you download? If you have an Android phone or tablet, go to Google Play Store. If you have an iPhone or iPad, go to Apple App Store. It's that simple. We have 3 streaming sites. Just type in TuneIn Radio or Radio Garden or Streema. That's STREEMA. Once the app is downloaded, type in and search for DZRJ. And now you can choose and enjoy DZRJ 810 AM and RJFM 100.3 anytime and anywhere. Hey, it's free.
You are watching the multi-awarded Radio Bandido TV on channel 224 Sky Cable and TV Plus boxes. Simulcast on DZRJ 810 AM. Informing, advising, and entertaining the Filipinos and OFWs around the world. Streaming live on www.facebook.com/DZRJ 810 AM or on YouTube, channel DZRJ 810 AM Radio Bandido.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.
Good morning, Philippines. This is the World News Jam right here on DZRJ and Radio Bandito TV. My name is, as always, Eric Lecain, coming to you from the beautiful Makati, Philippines. We talk about stories going on around the world. What's the biggest news right now outside of the Philippines, so you can stay very well informed. Now, there's a lot going on in the world right now. Israel has a ceasefire agreement which is trying its best to hold together. Donald Trump got started with his new job as president, and in just a week, he's doing a lot of stuff. Also, TikTok is back in the U.S. Lots more going on, so let's get cracking. First off, let's take a look at this ceasefire deal which is playing out in Israel. First of all, this ceasefire has been in the makings for over a year. Neither side trusts the other. Hamas doesn't trust the Israelis. Israel, well known for saying one thing and doing another. They will move the Palestinians somewhere, then attack the place they move them to. And of course, the Israelis think as soon as they stop attacking, then Hamas will plan their next attack, which could very well be true. In the negotiations, the Hamas delegation leader, who narrowly escaped an Israeli airstrike while 7 of his family members died, was on the first floor of the building, while on the second floor was the advisor to the Israeli intelligence, who vowed to kill everyone responsible for the October 7th attack of Hamas in 2023. And running up and down the stairs is the negotiators from the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt. These two sides, Israel and Hamas, hated each other so much that they had to stay on separate floors. The Egyptian, working with both sides, said they were extremely suspicious toward each other, no trust at all. The talks that took a week, dragged on over disagreements about maps showing where Israel would begin withdrawing troops and its demand that Hamas provide a list of hostages who remained alive. They were both looking at each other's words in this deal, thinking that each one was trying to set a trap for the other. But finally, they reluctantly made a deal, although still plagued with many disagreements. Last Saturday, it seemed it was done, that the fighting could stop and the Palestinians could come home to Gaza. Of course, the question is, come home to what? To to a completely destroyed city that now is just a pile of rubble. Come home to dig out relatives burned under the massive rubble. But even as the Israelis agreed to pull out and allow the trucks of humanitarian aid that was badly needed to come in, things were not as stable as everyone had hoped. I mean, of course they weren't. Each side is just waiting for the other to break the agreement. One slip by either side and Israel would be back with fighter jets, and the Hamas would be trying to figure out how to kill more Israelis. So tensions this past week were the highest, as if everyone was waiting for a pin to drop. The first problem was in the prisoners exchange deal. So far, several Israelis had been released, and Israel released many Palestinians. But there was a slip. One 29-year-old Israeli woman, I believe, was supposed to be released, but then wasn't. So where was she? The problem was Hamas didn't actually have her. Some other group did. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement had her, although somehow she was part of the deal with Hamas. The Israelis told Hamas she has to be returned before the Palestinians can continue northward to their homes there. And the Israelis were not kidding around. When the Palestinians tried to return to their northern section, Israel opened fire. Now, they shot in the air, but left people running for fear. Immediately, both sides blamed the other. Hamas said that Israel continues to procrastinate in implementing the terms of the ceasefire agreement and the prisoner exchange by maintaining the closure of 𝗪cie Street, which is preventing the return of displaced persons walking from the south to the north. The Palestinian militant group added that it holds Israel responsible for any delays in the implementation of the agreement and the repercussions that may arise on the remaining phases. So, this is where we are now. Israel is now asking the U.S. to supersede and Hamas to stick to this agreement. Basically, you must return the girl before you can move back into northern Gaza. And then there's the whole propaganda element. Each side needs the public to see that they are the ones getting the upper hand. Hamas made this 3-minute video of them handing over 4 women hostages. The women are smiling and thanking the Hamas officials for their good treatment. They were speaking in Arabic. However, none of them speak Arabic. So it's thought that they may be told exactly what to say. This is expected of Hamas. But then later on the Israeli side, it's nice to see pictures and videos of the hostages getting to see their relatives. Of course, Netanyahu was standing there in the scene. Video was being taken. The excitement and the tears of seeing the families, being held for so long in Gaza, not knowing if you would ever see them again. But after 15 months, having bombs dropped around them daily, these few people did survive. But the ceasefire agreement, will it survive? Still not complete. Israel is not going to let people into the north until Hamas holds up their side of the bargain. Israelis also released many prisoners. However, not all of them are allowed to stay in Israel. Some of them were deported to Egypt and will need to live in exile for now. This war in Israel is supposedly in a ceasefire. However, anyone who believes this war is over, well, you need to take a closer look. Israel is still blocking hundreds of Palestinians from going to their homes. And then there was the attack at the Wadi Bridge in Gaza. 4 injured, 1 dead, following an attack just the other day by Israeli snipers. Also, Israel just killed 15 people in Lebanon on the same day they were supposed to be pulling out of the area. Supposedly another 83 were injured trying to return to their homes in Lebanon. It's still unclear why the Israelis opened fire, because under the agreement with Hezbollah, Israel is supposed to be out of the area by today. However, that hasn't happened. supposed to be a 60-day ceasefire, but Israel is saying the agreement must be first enforced by the Lebanese army. According to the agreement, the Lebanese army must be in place to take over at the border along with the UN peacekeepers when Israel leaves. Also, Hezbollah must move into the north and away from the Israeli border. Now, Hezbollah, on the other hand, is saying that any breach of the agreement would be unacceptable and called on sponsors of the deal to exert pressure to ensure the implementation of the, and I quote here, full Israeli withdrawal and the deployment of the Lebanese army to the last inch of Lebanese territory and return of the people to their villages as quickly as possible. Israel has already killed thousands of people in Lebanon and displaced over 1 million, so they're not in any hurry to get out. They are saying that the Lebanese military is moving too slow and they won't leave until everything in this agreement is set. Also, it seems Israel may be planning to stay in some of the more remote regions, which would be in violation of the ceasefire. So, the UN peacekeepers have reported this to the UN, but really, what recourse do they have? What do they do if Israel won't follow the deal? The Lebanese army cannot beat the Israelis, so Hezbollah will not continue to follow the ceasefire if Israel does not completely withdraw. And here is where we have landed. It's complicated to make this work when neither side really trusts the other. Hamas doesn't trust Israel, Hezbollah doesn't trust Israel, and Israel doesn't trust anyone. Both sides are just waiting for the other to make a mistake. So, the country of Israel, including Gaza and the West Bank, has a ceasefire. But oh, it's fragile and can crack at any moment. So let's hope this thin piece of glass will hold, because if it doesn't, and the whole thing falls apart just when the civilians are returning home, well, that could be really bad. And what about the new President Trump? He chimed in on this in his first week on the job. He said he had spoken to the King of Jordan about building housing and moving 1 million Palestinians to other countries. He asked Jordan to take in a few. Trump said, I said to him that I'd love you to take on more, because I'm looking at the whole Gaza Strip right now and it's a mess. It's a real mess. Of course, Jordan already has about 2.3 million refugees living there, so they have not responded to taking on more directly, only that the idea is a bit of a red line to them. Trump went on to say Gaza is a demolition site right now. Almost everything is demolished and people are dying. We should build some housing in a different location. Now, in theory, building some nice condos there in Egypt and Jordan sounds like a good idea. However, the people of Palestine are there for a reason. The place they live is sacred to them. They don't really want to move. They have rebuilt this place time and time again over hundreds of years. They don't want to move to another country. They want their own country. They want a place in which they can govern themselves. It's just the current government in Israel will not give it to them. I mean, I've said in the past they should move to Montana in the U.S. There's nothing there, lots of space. The problem is, as far as they're concerned, Gaza belongs to them. And that's where they want to stay. And this is Eric Lecain on the World News Jam here on DZRJ and Radio Bandito TV. Thank you so much for joining us today. Speaking of Trump, let's get over to some of that Trump news, because there's always some. It's the first week of the new Trump presidency, and if you thought it was going to slide into his second term nice and slowly and carefully, well, you would be wrong. If you thought maybe he would hit the ground running, you would also be wrong. Trump started his new term with a bag of bombs, blowing up norms and precedents, some dating back 200 years. The first up, the biggie, birthright citizenship. If you were born in the U.S., then you are a U.S. citizen. This has been the law since the Constitution was written. But Trump wants this removed. The purpose being that if you are from another country and you come to the U.S. and you have your baby, that baby doesn't automatically get citizenship, especially if you are Mexican. This argument goes back to 1884 when the American Indians that originally came from the U.S. were not entitled to be U.S. citizens because they were not under the jurisdiction of the U.S. government. Now, if you remember, American Indians were in the U.S. way before the Europeans came. However, the Europeans were known as Americans. They created the first organized government, of which Indians were not included. Of course, at the time, you couldn't really deport the Indians because America is where they came from. So in 1924, the president changed and Indians were given citizenship because this is the place of their birth. However, Trump is saying no, that you must be under the jurisdiction of the U.S. in order to claim your citizenship. So if your mother and father are not under the jurisdiction of the U.S., basically living under the laws of you must live under the laws of the U.S. You cannot live under the laws of the country that you are from. Then, if that's the case, then you, as a baby, you must fall under the laws that are not those of the U.S. So you get that? So, as you can imagine, the lawsuits are flying everywhere. Even a federal judge in Seattle has temporarily blocked this executive order from ever taking effect. He said it's blatantly unconstitutional, so Trump has already said that he will appeal the judge's ruling. Now, the leader of the Democratic Party in Congress stated last week that no president can just change the Constitution, that Trump simply cannot do this. But Trump vows to fight to the end of this constitutional right all the way to the Supreme Court. I have a feeling many of Trump's new ideas are going to end up being challenged in the Supreme Court, which does tend to lean in Trump's favor, seeing as he picked a few of them. But this could lead to a major upheaval in people who already have citizenship, even for people that are already adults. If you are picked up by INS and they look back maybe 20 to 30 years in your history and find that your parents were not legal in the U.S., you could very well find yourself on a plane back to your country, or rather the country that your parents are from, which could most likely be a place you have never been to. This will end up being a very interesting case because it will decide if a president has the power to change the Constitution. And if he could change something like this, could he eventually change the First Amendment to no longer allow freedom of speech? Trump has made it clear that speech that talks good about him is fine and legal. However, if you or your TV station or radio station were to say something negative about him, well, that would not be legal. This is something Trump has hinted to several times, but with these types of executive orders, Trump's people know they are not legal, but they go ahead and release them anyway. Trump signed 26 orders on his first day. Most presidents sign 0 in their first month. Some of these executive orders have made not only the U.S. a bit nervous, but some of the rest of the world. Now, of course, many of these orders will be challenged in the courts, but of course, Trump knows this. But even so, some of them cannot. And one of those most controversial ones, they're all controversial, is the release of the January 6 rioters. These are the people that stormed the Capitol building after Trump's loss in the last election. The reason many are in jail is because after breaking windows and knocking down doors and beating police officers, who they held down on the ground, beat them, used stun guns, pepper sprayed them. They had multiple concussions, cracked skulls, lacerations, eye injuries. several have lifelong injuries that will never be able to return to work. You know, some police died, but not on January 6th, but days later. That's how Trump is able to say, well, no one died on that day. But the main issue being, what could have happened on that day? There were some that thought by killing certain officials, they could keep Trump as president. In some cases, the attack was pre-planned and intentional. Many pleaded guilty. You know, once all the evidence came out, they made plea deals once there was no other choice for them. For the Trump officials, it was on the table to possibly pardon some of the rioters that were not involved in the violence. They were just there, you know, destroying property. But in the end, Trump said, F it. Just release them all. Around 1,500. Even the most violent ones that have vowed retribution once they are released from jail. And they're out now. Some that had 12, 15, 20-year sentences. This, of course, has worried certain police officers that testified against them, worried that these people will come after them or their families. But the biggest worry among lawmakers is the precedent this will create. That you can beat police officers to near death and still go free if Trump is the president. What message does that send some of these militia groups in the U.S. that are MAGA fanatics? This could also put Republicans in a very sticky predicament. They are supposed to be the party of law and order. However, now they have a convicted felon as president who just pardoned the same people that sent them running for their lives just 4 years ago. They even asked Trump in a press conference why he pardoned the man that repeatedly stunned a police officer in the back of his head before beating him. Trump said he didn't know about that case, but would look into it. He said he was a friend to the police more than any other president. Went on to say that the people in jail were there because they love our country. So a pardon was appropriate. Most Republicans have decided to stand by the president on this decision. They don't want to end up getting themselves on a list that Trump's people would target. But some, such as Susan Collins from Maine, spoke their real feelings, saying it had overall been a terrible week for our justice system. But many Republicans, including Collins, still continue to refer back to Biden pardoning his son, that he pardoned his son for his tax case and gun license application case, that if Biden can pardon his son for taxes, then why can't Trump pardon these violent rioters trying to overthrow the government? So Trump let these violent criminals out, but this leads to another executive action, and that is finding immigrants. This week, Trump sent out flurries of ICE and Secret Service officials looking for illegal immigrants. He sent them to schools, churches, and farms, looking for children and spouses or anyone that could tell them where to find other illegal immigrants. Now, the legality of this is even in question. It seems you can't send armed officials into a school without a warrant. Now, this happened at a school in Chicago where 90% of the school is Hispanic, but it turns out it was actually the Secret Service looking for someone who might have made a threat against the president. But they were not allowed into the school for fear that some of the children might be removed. So this paranoia could be because Trump also has ordered the Mexican border to be closed. He's sending troops to the border to close and stop all applications coming into the U.S. Supposedly there are some 270,000 migrants waiting on the Mexican side of the border for their appointments, hoping to get into the U.S. There was actually this app, CBP, one of which you can use to request asylum into the U.S., but the app is being shut down by the Trump administration. So far, nearly 1 million people have come into the country via that app, but it's still unclear how many of those will actually get to stay once that program is removed. Right now, the people that have the appointments must wait 21 days to enter the country. But will Trump honor the appointments that are already made? So far, no one knows. But it's clear that if those appointments get canceled, and it looks like no more will be given, then there might be a mad rush for the border. Right now, there is a 4-year low in illegal border crossings, which has, of course, been in dispute by the Trump party. But a lot of the drop in border crossings has been, in part, due to this app, giving people a legal pathway to come into the U.S. In any case, if there is a mad rush to the border, all the work the government has done to keep things calm at the border could go away overnight. As of now, Trump has removed hundreds of illegals rounded up since he took office. There are already deportation flights leaving the U.S. with illegal immigrants in shackles on them. So far, the flights are carrying around 80 migrants at a time. They cost a fortune. They're landing in Guatemala, not Mexico. The Mexican government will not allow U.S. deportation planes to land there. However, Guatemala is open for 2 flights a day. Trump has called this a national emergency and has continued to use the word invasion to describe what is going on at the border. There's a reason for using a word like that, so Trump can involve the military. Invasion has the connotation of a foreign entity coming into the country to circumvent the government. Now, this is clearly not the case. Most immigrants are coming to the country to find a better life, not overthrow the government. But this is the terminology that Trump likes to use. If we remember back when Trump was president, before he rounded up people and put them in camps for deportation, the problem was before is he was separating the children from their parents, kind of a deterrent to anyone else thinking of bringing in their family to the country. However, many of the U.S. found that this to be cruel. So Biden when he took office, he created a group that was responsible for finding the parents of the children lost in that shuffle. Well, Trump has abolished that entire program to find the parents of children left behind. It's really one of the worst policies of the first Trump presidency, to apprehend families and separate the children and send the parents back across the border without their children, and not make careful records of what child went to what parent. Also leaving no way for the parents to find their children later. Many of the children were too young to even know their parents' full name. Now, there is not a way for them to ever find their parents. And even if they were able to find their parents, how could you reunite them at this point? I mean, the parents can't come to the U.S. There's another big question looming, is how far Trump's reach will go into the states that welcome foreign immigrants. We know how important immigrants are to the U.S. economy. They are an integral part of the supply of food in the U.S. and that they pick the vegetables and fruits and work in the chicken and the pig farms. If they were just to disappear, the U.S. would have to hire Americans to do the job, but the salary for those workers would have to go way up, thus increasing the price of everything that Americans eat. This is why some states are very open to immigrants coming to live in their state. But Trump has threatened to cut funding to these states that harbor immigrants. He tried this before when he was president, but of course the courts blocked him. But now he's threatened to go after certain officials in those states, which is escalating the situation to another level. Trump is also looking to start up these travel bans again, mostly to Muslim countries, but also from Latino countries. So here we go with that again. I'm sure lawsuits are going to come flying. But I'm going to be very interested in what happens to all those people under Biden's program. The people from Cuba and Haiti, Nicaragua and Venezuela. People that are in the U.S. legally, but are under the Biden program. Now, of course, those programs are all dead now, but what about the people that they already let in and that are under the program, waiting for their citizenship? This includes the immigrants that Trump accused of eating cats and dogs in Ohio. Can Trump do take-backs, remove all these people? And when they say all, there are many thousands of people in communities across the U.S. But Trump is not just after foreigners in the U.S., but every foreigner country that accepts any kind of U.S. aid. The U.S. has been known for taking care of foreign allies that are maybe not doing as well. This has been the norm for hundreds of years, but as of last week, Trump has stopped all aid to foreign countries. For the next 90 days, there is a stop work order on existing foreign assistance until everything can be evaluated. Now, there are exceptions, such as military aid to Israel and Egypt, of course. But everyone else, the order was sent around the world. Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State, said every dollar we spend, every program we fund, every policy we pursue must be justified with the answers to three simple questions. Does it make America safer? Does it make America stronger? Does it make America more prosperous? Think about that for a moment. Some have described this as a global freakout for many countries. One humanitarian official said this 90-day pause is going to have incredible disruption. Basically, it's as bad as it can possibly be. Many are worried that this will leave an opening of where the U.S. used to stand in the world as the leading humanitarian and will open the door for another country to take over that role, that country being China. China has been trying for years to take the number one spot, although China's aid to countries, especially in Africa, comes with mostly strings attached, such as PEPFAR, the AIDS program that the U.S. funds. Cutting that aid will put some countries in a crisis, could potentially put millions of lives in jeopardy. PEPFAR provides life-saving medicine for more than 20 million people. And one day, very soon, those antivirals that the U.S. is responsible for sending out, they won't be in the hands of the people that those virals are keeping alive. But this leads to yet another major change Trump has made. He's removed the U.S. from the World Health Organization. Now, this is something you might want to ask why. Why would he do something like this? For decades, the U.S. has held considerable power in determining the direction of the global health policies and programs. President Trump issued 3 executive orders on his first day in office that may signal the end of that era. There are 194 countries that share critical information and data on treatments, vaccines. But as for now, the U.S. will not be included anymore in the sharing of that data. The issue is that the U.S. is one of the largest funders of money to the WHO, so it's a shock to the system that relies so much on that funding. Supposedly the U.S. actually cannot just do this, that they have to give, a year's notice because the budgets for the year are already set up. But Trump is saying, well, wait a minute, I withdrew from the WHO back in 2020. Of course, Biden restored the U.S.'s standing in the WHO, but Trump is saying, well, that's not his problem. But here's the thing. Biden actually paid up front, so it's not just a total stoppage of money. But Trump is stopping all kinds of federal funded research in the U.S. also for now, for everything, including cancer research. In one day, Trump was able to ban all travel and programs and grants and contracts for federal health research in the United States. In fact, a new report it's about to be released from the U.S. Health Department, all these reports all put on hold. Also, funding on foreign projects all stops immediately. Supposedly, the CDC was ordered no longer make any announcements of any kind. And all this comes in the middle of something we have been discussing on the show before, the bird flu, which has infected 158 million chickens in the U.S. alone. It's even affected cows now. As we talked about, a few weeks ago, it's been transferred over to humans and moving through the U.S. Of all the times to completely stop research on this, seems like it's the wrong time, doesn't it? The bird flu is currently poised to become a worldwide epidemic, and if there's any time to share information and research around the world, it seems like this is it. But the HHS agencies like the CDC and the FDA, as well as others, including Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Indian Health Service, the National Institute of Health, Substance Abuse Medicine Centers, are now forced to curtail all their activities. The problem really is that so many agencies around the world rely on the U.S. for labs and research. They're now having to quickly change their operating procedures in order to deal with this sudden shutdown in the U.S. A lot of people are very worried now about losing their jobs within the National Health Agency. Once these jobs are lost, will they ever be replaced again? The people Trump has put to run the new U.S. Health Department are the likes of JFK Jr. for the HHS and Dave Weldon for the CDC, both of which are very anti-vaccine. They will be having their Senate hearings coming up this week, which reminds me of the Senate hearings that have happened just this week. Pete Hegseth. Oh, we've talked about him. The nominee for Secretary of Defense. Seems before, when I was talking about him, that he would not make it past even the first day in his confirmation hearings. However, by the slimmest majority, he is now the head of the most powerful military in the world. Many did not think Hegseth would make it this far, partly because he has little to no experience in running an organization like this. He's a Fox News host. But what was thought to really disqualify him was that he was accused of rape and ended up paying the woman $50,000 not to talk about it. He was married at the time. Also, the fact that he cheated on his first wife 5 times, who divorced him, then married his second wife, but then got a co-worker pregnant while married to her. So then the second wife divorced him and then later married the woman that he got pregnant during his marriage to the second wife, who he cheated on with a woman that later accused him of rape. Also, his mother said that he was an abuser of women. And then his sister wrote a letter to the Senate about his abuse of women, about the abuse of her sister, his second wife. And there was this crazy exchange during the hearing where Hegseth was questioned about his excessive drinking, coming to work drunk, being carried out of an event being drunk. Hegseth said he won't comment on anonymous allegations. However, the senator said none of these people are anonymous. All these people have all come forward. His nomination really seemed dead in the water, even for Republicans. He has stated in the past that women should not be able to participate in combat missions. He complained of the burdensome rules of engagement when it comes to human rights laws. He said he will unravel diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in the military. When he was asked in the hearing about ASEAN countries, he talked about Australia, Korea, and China. The senator pointed out that none of these are ASEAN countries, and then asked if he could name one. And he could not. Ordinarily, any one of these would be disqualifying to run the U.S. military. However, even though some Republicans said he was not qualified in any way, they went ahead and confirmed him. By the way, remember the ban on TikTok in the U.S. that we had been talking about? Well, it was actually turned off for a day. then Trump had the ban lifted after the company put up a sign during the login mentioning that they were working with the Trump administration. Now, Trump is kind of pro TikTok because they actually helped his election. But remember, it was Trump that actually got them banned in the first place. Congress actually voted overwhelmingly to ban TikTok unless it sold its company to an American affiliate, which they didn't. Supposedly, TikTok just retrieves too much information about Americans for the Congress to stomach. So that's why they decided that. America is better off without TikTok. TikTok decided not to sell its company to America and take the chance they could get Trump to allow them to stay. And so far, so good. And this is the World News Jam right here on DZRJ and Radio Bandito. My name's Eric Lecain. Thank you so much for joining us today. You know, I just wanted to talk just a little bit about the TikTok situation because there's a few updates that could slightly affect all of us. First of all, let's talk about Jimmy Donaldson, aka the Mr. Beast, one of the richest YouTubers ever. He was jubilant as he told tens of millions of TikTok followers about his bid to buy TikTok. He said, "I might become you guys' new CEO, and I'm super excited." By the way, he said that from his private jet. He then proceeded to promise $10,000 to 5 random new followers. This post has been viewed more than 73 million times since Monday. Donaldson said he could not share details about his bid, but he promised, "Just know it's going to be crazy." Donaldson is one of multiple suitors who have expressed interest in purchasing TikTok because, like I said, it's up for sale in the U.S. Last year, then President Joe Biden signed a new law that gave TikTok's China-based parent company ByteDance until January 19th to sell the platform or face a ban in the United States, of which it was banned. Like I said, for about a day. The U.S. Congress addressed concerns about TikTok's link to the Chinese government, worries about the app being a national security risk. Donald Trump, who just made an executive order allowing the platform to stay up, has floated the possibility of a joint venture. He said, "I would like the U.S. to have a 50% ownership position in TikTok. By doing this, we save TikTok to keep it in good hands and allow it to stay up." That executive order that allows the app to stay operational is for another 75 days. Earlier this month, Bloomberg reported that China was considering a TikTok sale to Elon Musk. Wouldn't that be something? He, of course, is the world's richest man and a close ally to President Trump, who already owns the social media platform X. Musk himself wrote on X this week that while he has long been against a TikTok ban, the current situation where TikTok is allowed to operate in America, but X is not allowed to operate in China. Well, that's unbalanced to Elon. He said something needs to change. Later at a news conference Tuesday, Trump was asked by a reporter if he would be open to Musk buying the platform. Trump said, "I would be if he wanted to buy it. Of course, I'd like Larry to buy it too." Referring to Oracle's chairman, Larry Ellison, longtime Trump supporter who was on stage with him at the time. Oracle is one of TikTok's main service providers, managing many of the data centers where billions of the platform's dance videos are stored. Last year, Oracle warned that a TikTok ban could hurt its business. The cloud computing giant was also a leading contender to buy the social media platform in 2020, back when Trump was trying to ban it. Also, billionaire investor Frank McCourt also expressed interest in TikTok and has been doing media interviews about the prospect for several months. McCourt has said he wants TikTok to run on technology overseen by the Project Liberty Institute, which he has founded. He has been a critic of data collection practices on social media companies. Project Liberty is bidding for TikTok without its proprietary algorithm. McCourt told CNBC this week that Project Liberty is not interested in the algorithm or the Chinese technology. even as he acknowledged that the platform is worthless without it? Of course it is. I don't really understand that. Ultimately, as many believe, President Trump is likely to have a major role in selecting the U.S. buyer of TikTok. And more than likely, someone that will run the platform will benefit Trump in some way. Most likely, Trump will somehow have some kind of control in the end of the platform. As many have already said, he will also profit from the sale in some way. But the problem of China having so much access to the user's information still might be a problem, even if an American company owns it, especially as with companies like X. The power of the information it collects is still in the hands of someone. That someone, Elon Musk, clearly has a political agenda. Obviously, there is a lot of power in the hands of owning such a platform. There's been rumors that Microsoft is in talks to possibly acquire the company. Even Shark Tank's host Kevin O'Leary. So everyone wants to get a piece of this. I wonder why everyone is waiting until the app was actually banned. Did TikTok not believe that this would actually happen? In any case, they have another 75 days to figure something out. What I find so interesting about this is the Justice Department in the U.S. could not act independently on this case. That even though Trump actually initially caused the Congress to look into TikTok in the first place, he now has the power to undo what they did. In other words, Trump was able to fix a problem that he actually was the one that caused. And now that he loves TikTok because it's actually helped him with his popularity. But as I've said on the show before, I never really thought that TikTok really was all that dangerous. It really didn't cause that big a danger to national security of the U.S. as far as China is concerned, because the app is, well, it's housed in the U.S. But honestly, once you start to see what type of data TikTok is able to retrieve, you start to realize that it's not about just watching dances and videos of cats. There's a lot about your tendencies toward politics, religion, education. And if for some reason there was a massive conflict between the U.S. and China, this type of information would be so incredibly valuable. But the interesting thing is, the same data is also collected from platforms such as Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and X. I guess you now understand why all these platforms are banned in China. They don't want the U.S. company knowing so much about them. Anyway, the fight for TikTok goes on. Just remembering the panic so many of my American friends had when TikTok went offline. And that was just for one day. This is Lecain on the World News Jam on DZRJ and Radio Bandito. Remember the Titanic? It hit an iceberg that it couldn't see. Well, right now in the Southern Ocean, there's an iceberg that no one could ever miss. A23A. I love that name. The world's largest iceberg. It's out there just floating around, making headlines with its colossal presence and potential impact on wildlife and humans. A gargantuan iceberg is a marvel of nature once stretched over 1,040 square miles, twice the size of London. For perspective, it's slightly smaller than the entire province of Cebu. However, it isn't A23A's size that's now causing a sense of trepidation among scientists. It's the iceberg's trajectory. And that right now is its primary concern. A23A has become untethered from the South Orkney Islands and is anonymously drifting towards South Georgia, which is a British island and a wildlife haven. Now, there is a government vessel down there, the Faroes, watching this thing floating around. And the official said, icebergs are inherently dangerous. I would be extraordinarily happy if this one would just miss us. Iceberg A23A isn't just a looming mass of ice. It's potentially a devastating force with parts already breaking off into large slabs and then floating off on their own. These fragments could dwell in the surrounding waters for years, making nautical navigation very dangerous. The story of A23A began actually back in 1986 when the iceberg was born from the Fletcher ice shelf in the Antarctica and broke off. It lay dormant in the seabed of the 𝗪𝗱𝗱 Sea before breaking off on its journey north in 2020. Initially, the iceberg progress was slowed by an ocean phenomenon known as Taylor column, causing it to spin around in one place. Later satellite images showed it was beginning to move. It had split from the area and was caught in a current. The oceanographer with the British Arctic said, "It's exciting to see A23 on the move again after periods of being stuck. We are interested to see if it will take the same route as other large icebergs that have come broken off of the Arctic shelf." Interestingly, most icebergs from Antarctica follow the same route. Over 90% of them enter the 𝗪𝗱𝗱 clockwise flowing current off East Antarctica. They ultimately make their way north along the Antarctic Peninsula and venture into the Drake's Passage warmer parts of the South Atlantic waters. This passage is referred to as Iceberg Alley. Now, I went back and looked, and I've talked about this island before, and an iceberg that was named A68A back in 2017. This iceberg floated for around 3 years and barely missed the island then. And then another also drifted near the island, leaving giant slabs of ice in the water. These slabs floating around are what's very dangerous for boats. The problem this time is there's a chance this massive floating island of ice could run right into that British island. The island is home to many animals, including penguins and seals and albatrosses and whales. It's a huge sanctuary for multitudes of species who come there to feed and mate. Right now, the iceberg has not broken up at all and is staying in a single piece, which is not normal for an iceberg of this size. The problem is how the iceberg will end up in the current. Right now, it's just wandering around, but if it gets caught up in the currents that follow directly to the island, then there's a problem. It just runs up on the continental shelf and gets itself lodged there. If this happens, this could be all kinds of problems, especially for the animals there that use that area as a feeding ground. Basically, the ocean, the penguins and the seals feed there. All that area would just completely disappear. You have to remember how big this iceberg is. It's not like you can walk around it. It's 130 feet high, something like 1 trillion tons. Animals such as penguins would have to end up swimming very far in order to get food for their young and themselves. Scientists are already saying this would dramatically increase the mortality rates among animals. Icebergs breaking, this normal occurrence is breaking up as a normal occurrence, but it's just happening a lot more frequently now as there is a huge jump in the Earth's temperature. This iceberg right now is not really a threat to humans because eventually, as it drifts northward, it will break up into smaller pieces and melt. But the impact on marine life could be enormous. If you look at the pictures of it, it looks like a giant wall just moving through the ocean. They are still not sure of the timeline that this thing could collide, but this all depends on the speed of the currents, which now are changing according to what the weather might be. In any case, we may see more of these types of occurrences in our lifetime. There are already predictions coming out at the time that after we are gone, or me gone anyway, that if the temperature continues to rise at its current rate, Greenland's ice sheet will be completely gone by the year 3000. The water levels will rise around 7 meters. Countries like Japan could lose large parts of its landmass. Of course, it will also be open to new shipping routes, thus increasing commerce. Communication is going to continue to improve as more ocean opens. There'll be more area for fiber cables. There, of course, will be more fish because the ocean will eventually increase. So the world will adapt. It always does. I guess the question is, how will we? Start looking at these predictions. There will eventually be more people but less land in the future of the Earth. That is, if humans continue on the path they are on. Of course, I won't be around to see if this happens, but let's just hope that someone is. This is Eric Lecain on the World News Jam on DZRJ and Radio Bandito TV. Thank you so much for spending time with us on the show today, talking about stories going on around the world. Please join us again next week for more world news and discussion. So until then, everybody be safe out there, and we will see you then.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.